I still remember the way they looked at me that evening, like I didn't belong in their world. Their eyes weren't cruel exactly, but cold, distant. As if they were trying to figure out how a woman like me could possibly raise a son like Daniel, their precious, successful son. I stood there in my simple dress, the same old purse I'd carried for years hanging from my shoulder. I could feel my hands trembling as I tried to smile politely. Inside, I was nervous, not because I cared about what they thought of me, but because this was the first time I was meeting the family my son was about to marry into. Daniel had told me his fiancé's family was traditional and a little proud. I thought he meant they were old-fashioned. But as soon as I stepped into their house, the huge white villa with shining floors and expensive paintings, I realized what he meant was, they looked down on people like me. The moment I entered, the air felt heavy. I could sense the judgment before anyone said a word. Her mother, elegant, perfectly dressed, her pearls catching the light, smiled that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, you must be Daniel's mother," she said, pausing just long enough for her gaze to travel from my worn shoes to my simple sweater. I nodded. "Yes, it's so nice to meet you." Her lips twitched slightly. "Likewise." But the warmth never came. Her husband, a tall man with silver hair and a deep voice, just gave me a short nod and went back to his phone. And her daughter, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law Emily, looked embarrassed. She smiled nervously but didn't say much. I could tell she didn't know what to do. Part of her wanted to stand beside me, to make me feel welcome. But the other part, the part raised by that polished, proud family, stayed silent. So, I stood there in the middle of their perfect living room, clutching my purse, pretending I didn't notice their judgment. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, because I knew something they didn't. They saw a woman with calloused hands and old clothes. They saw a poor mother from a small town. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to see if they deserved my son. That day, as they whispered and glanced at each other, I decided to keep my silence and play their game. If they thought I was poor and simple, then so be it. I would let them believe that. Sometimes silence says more than pride ever could, because life has a way of revealing the truth, quietly, but powerfully. And soon, they would learn that humility and richness don't come from money or titles, but from the heart. I smiled softly that evening, pretending not to notice their whispers. But deep down, I knew this meeting was only the beginning, and the day they'd find out who I truly was would be the day they'd never forget. When I got home that night, I sat quietly by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights flickered outside, and I could hear the faint hum of cars passing by. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, tired eyes, gentle smile lines, a few gray hairs escaping my bun. I thought about the dinner conversation, about the careful way Emily's parents had spoken to me. Their words were polite, but their tone was sharp. Every compliment felt like it came wrapped in judgment. "Daniel has done so well for himself," her mother had said, twirling her wine glass. I smiled proudly and replied, "Yes, he's always worked hard." She had nodded and said, "It's quite impressive, considering his background." Then she looked at me, and I understood what she meant. I had spent most of my life working long hours as a nurse in a small clinic. I never made much money, but I made enough to raise my son with honesty, dignity, and kindness. After my husband passed away when Daniel was only 8, I became both mother and father. I cooked, cleaned, worked night shifts, and still made sure Daniel never felt alone. He was my reason to wake up every morning, and I thought I'd done well. He grew up respectful, humble, and kind. So, when I saw the way Emily's family treated me, I told myself not to be angry. They didn't know my story. They didn't know me. The next morning, Daniel came to visit. He was smiling, but I could tell he'd noticed something the night before. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "I know my future in-laws can be a little cold." I laughed softly. "A little cold? That's one way to put it." He smiled, a bit embarrassed. "They just come from a different world. But I promise you, they'll love you once they get to know you." I nodded. "I'm not worried, son. I just want you to be happy." And I meant it. Because as a mother, your child's happiness always matters more than your pride. Over the next few weeks, preparations for the engagement began. Emily's family offered to host everything: the venue, the catering, the guest list. They said it was easier that way, but I could feel it was also a way to stay in control. I offered to help, but her mother politely declined. "Oh, that's sweet of you," she said. "But we've already taken care of everything. It's best if you just relax and enjoy." Her tone was kind, but her eyes said, "Don't interfere." So I stepped back. I watched from a distance, quietly, patiently. Every time I visited, I wore my plain clothes. Every time I smiled, I made sure it was genuine, not defensive, because I wasn't there to compete. I was there to observe. At one of the family gatherings, something happened that made me realize how deep their pride went. We were all seated in the living room, and her father began talking about property investments. He turned to me and said, "So, Mrs. Carter, what do you do for a living?" "I'm a nurse," I said, smiling. "Retired now, but I worked for 30 years in a community hospital." He nodded slowly. "That's noble work." Then he added, "Not easy, though. I suppose it must have been difficult to make ends meet." His wife chuckled softly. "Oh, but look at her son now. Daniel really turned things around for the family." I could feel my cheeks grow warm. But I smiled and replied calmly, "Yes, he did well. I'm very proud of him." They thought they were complimenting me, but in reality, they were reminding me of where they believed I belonged, below them. What they didn't know was that I had built something quietly over the years. The small clinic where I'd worked had once been struggling. When I received a small inheritance from my late parents, I invested it in that clinic. Over time, it grew, and eventually, I became one of the co-owners. I never told anyone, not even Daniel. I didn't need to. We lived modestly, simply because peace meant more to me than luxury. But now, watching this family measure my worth through my clothes and my background, I realized something. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strength waiting for the right moment. The day of the engagement arrived. The hall was filled with lights, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Everyone looked elegant, and I came in my usual soft blue dress, the same one Daniel had bought for my birthday 3 years ago. I didn't wear diamonds. I didn't carry designer bags, but I carried something they couldn't see: dignity. When Emily's mother saw me walk in, she whispered something to one of her friends and smiled. I caught her glance, and for a second I almost felt small again. But then I remembered I had nothing to prove. I took my seat in the corner and watched my son glow with happiness. That alone was enough for me. I thought the night would pass peacefully. But I didn't know that this was only the calm before the storm. Something would happen that evening that would change everything and show everyone exactly who I was. The engagement evening shimmered with golden lights and laughter. Every table glowed with candles, the air thick with perfume and chatter. I stood by the corner watching my son, so happy, so radiant, holding Emily's hand as they greeted guests. It warmed my heart to see him smile like that. But beneath that joy, I felt something else, a quiet discomfort. People's eyes glanced at me now and then, their expressions polite but curious, almost pitying. I could tell they were whispering about me. A few of Emily's relatives came over to introduce themselves. Her aunt smiled thinly and said, "Oh, you must be Daniel's mother. We've heard so much about your strength. It must have been hard raising a child alone." I smiled back. "It was sometimes, but it was also the most beautiful thing I've ever done." She nodded, but quickly added, "Yes, of course. And now you must be so proud he's marrying into such a well-established family." The way she said, "such a well-established family," made my chest tighten, as if I should feel grateful. I wanted to walk away, but I didn't want to make a scene. So I smiled again and excused myself to the refreshment table. As I poured myself a glass of water, I overheard two younger women whispering nearby. "I heard Daniel's mom worked as a nurse her whole life," one said. The other laughed softly. "Really? I thought she was a housekeeper or something." They giggled quietly. My hand trembled a little, but I steadied the glass and took a slow sip. I told myself, stay calm, stay graceful. They don't know you. Don't let them change who you are. Moments later, Emily's mother approached me with that same perfect smile. "Oh, there you are, dear. I hope you're comfortable. Would you mind helping in the back for a bit? The caterers need an extra hand serving dessert." For a second, I wasn't sure I heard her right. I blinked. "You want me to serve dessert?" "Yes," she said smoothly. "You seem like the helpful type. You know, good with practical things." Her tone was gentle, but her meaning wasn't. In that instant, I understood exactly what she was doing, putting me in my place. Still, I nodded politely. "Of course," I said quietly. "I don't mind helping." She gave me a satisfied smile and walked away. So, I went to the kitchen area and helped the staff carry trays of small cakes to the tables. The waiters looked confused at first, but I told them it was fine. It didn't bother me. What hurt wasn't the work. It was the humiliation behind the request. When I came out with the tray, I saw Daniel across the hall. He froze. His smile faded when he saw me serving guests. He walked over quickly. "Mom, what are you doing?" he whispered. I smiled softly. "Just helping." He turned red with anger. "Who told you to do this?" "Daniel," I said calmly. "It's okay. Let it go." "Not tonight." He looked like he wanted to say something, but I gently touched his hand. "Your happiness is more important to me than my pride," I whispered. He nodded slowly, though I saw the pain in his eyes. He turned and walked toward Emily's family, his jaw tight. A few moments later, I saw him speaking to Emily's mother. Her face stiffened, and she quickly turned away. I didn't hear the conversation, but I knew he had defended me. Later that night, when everyone was dancing, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The garden lights twinkled softly, and the cool breeze brushed my face. I looked up at the stars and took a deep breath. That's when Emily came out. She stood beside me silently for a moment, then said softly, "Daniel told me what happened." "I'm so sorry." I smiled gently. "It's all right, dear. You don't have to apologize for someone else's behavior." She hesitated. They can be a little proud sometimes. I promise they'll learn to love you." I looked at her, young, sweet, and caught between love and family expectations. I placed my hand on hers. "I hope so, Emily, because I truly want to love you like my own daughter." She smiled with watery eyes. "Thank you." We stood there quietly for a while. The laughter and music from inside echoed faintly, behind us. I wanted to believe that everything would be fine after that night, but I was wrong. That engagement was only the beginning. Their pride hadn't reached its peak. Yet, it would take something far bigger and far crueler before the truth finally came out. After the engagement, weeks passed quietly. I tried to believe things would get better. Daniel and Emily visited often, and every time I welcomed them with warmth. I'd cook their favorite dishes, ask about their day, and listen with a smile. I wanted her to feel like she was already part of our family. But deep inside, I could sense something, a distance. Not from Emily, but from her parents. They never called, never invited me over. Every meeting felt like a formality, a polite performance. When the wedding preparations began, Emily's family took control of everything. They didn't ask for my opinion on anything. Not the venue, not the guest list, not even the seating plan. Still, I didn't complain. I told myself, let them have their way. My son's happiness was all that mattered. A week before the wedding, Emily's mother called me. Her tone was calm but sharp. "Mrs. Green," she said, "about the rehearsal dinner. We'd like to keep it small and private. Only immediate family from our side will be attending." I was quiet for a moment. "Oh, I see. So I shouldn't come?" She hesitated. "It's not that we don't want you there. It's just, well, the atmosphere might feel more comfortable for everyone if it's limited." I smiled softly, even though she couldn't see it through the phone. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for letting me know." After hanging up, I sat in silence. The tea on my table had gone cold, but I didn't notice. For the first time, I felt truly unwanted. Not as a guest, not as a mother, just an inconvenience. That night, Daniel came over. "Mom," he said, "please don't take it personally." "Emily's mom, she's just very particular," I nodded. "It's fine, son. I don't need fancy dinners. I just need to see you happy." He smiled and hugged me, but I could tell his heart was heavy too. When the wedding day arrived, I dressed simply. A cream-colored dress, nothing too bright, nothing too grand. I wanted to look neat and graceful. But when I entered the grand hall, I realized I stood out for the wrong reason. Emily's family shimmered in luxury. Designer gowns, gold jewelry, perfect hair. I felt like a shadow among sunlight. And though I carried myself with quiet dignity, I saw the sideways glances. During the ceremony, I sat in the front row, my heart full of pride for my son. When he took Emily's hand, tears filled my eyes. For a brief moment, I forgot everything else. But peace never lasts long in a place where pride rules. At the wedding dinner, while guests laughed and toasted, Emily's father raised his glass and said loudly, "To our daughter, marrying into a good man's family. And may she always be supported by people who appreciate her worth." There was a pause, a quiet, uncomfortable one. Everyone knew what he meant. Daniel's grip on his glass tightened. I could see the hurt in his eyes. Before he could say anything, Emily's mother added sweetly, "Yes, and let's be thankful that love can bridge even the biggest." Social differences. That word, social differences, echoed through my mind. I wanted to stand up and say something, to tell them that I wasn't ashamed of who I was, that I had worked my whole life not for wealth, but for dignity. But I didn't. I simply looked down at my hands and smiled quietly. After the dinner, I went outside for air again. It was raining lightly. The air smelled of wet roses and cold earth. And as I stood there under the dim garden light, a familiar black car pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door, and from it came my brother, Michael. He was tall, calm, and dressed in a simple dark suit. But anyone who looked closely could see this was a man of authority, a man used to being respected. "Sarah," he said softly, "I thought I'd surprise you." I smiled, though my eyes filled with tears. "You picked quite a night to show up." He laughed gently. "I wanted to see my nephew's wedding. You didn't even tell me it was today." "I didn't want to bother you," I said. He looked at me carefully. "You never bother me, sister. You forget who you are sometimes." Before I could reply, Emily's father walked out to smoke a cigar. He saw us and smiled politely. "Oh, you must be Daniel's uncle." Michael nodded. "Yes, I'm Sarah's brother." The man extended his hand, smiling confidently. "Pleasure to meet you. I didn't realize Sarah's family could attend." Michael shook his hand firmly. We tend to stay low-key, but I couldn't miss this day. A moment later, one of the guests, a man from the corporate world, came running over, his face pale. Mr. Reed? Sir, I didn't know you were related to the groom's family. Emily's father's face went blank. Wait, you know him? The man nodded quickly. Of course. He's the founder of Reed Holdings, one of the biggest investment firms in the country. The air went silent. Emily's father's hand dropped from the handshake, his expression frozen. He looked between me and my brother, disbelief in his eyes. You're her brother? Michael smiled calmly. That's right, and she's the strongest woman I know. I stood there quietly, feeling a strange peace wash over me. Not pride, just quiet justice. Emily's parents stood speechless, the weight of their own arrogance pressing down on them. And for the first time all evening, no one looked at me with pity. The silence that followed was heavy. Emily's parents stood there, their faces pale, unsure what to say. They had spent months looking down on me, whispering behind my back, thinking I was nothing but a poor, lonely widow with no place in their glittering world. But now, everything was out in the open. My brother's presence alone was enough to shift the air. He wasn't boastful. He didn't say a word about money or power. He simply stood there, calm, kind, and respectful, and that more than anything made them realize who I really was. Emily's father cleared his throat. I had no idea you were related to Mr. Reed. My brother smiled gently. That's because my sister doesn't go around talking about status. She lives with humility, not ego. Emily's mother looked down at her shoes. We might have misjudged things. I said softly. There's nothing to apologize for. You saw what you wanted to see. I didn't need to correct you. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel walked over, his eyes shining with quiet pride. Mom, he said, you've always been the richest person I know. Not because of money, but because of your heart, those words. They melted every bit of pain I had carried. I smiled through my tears and hugged him tightly. My son, I whispered. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Later that night, after most guests had left, Emily came to me. Her eyes were red from crying. Mom, she said softly, I didn't know how my parents treated you. I'm so sorry. I took her hands in mine. You have nothing to apologize for, dear. Sometimes people need to see things with their own eyes before they understand. She nodded, her voice trembling. They do now. They really do. As we stood there, my brother came over and smiled. He placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Take good care of your mother-in-law, he said kindly. She's one of a kind. She nodded quickly. I will. I promise. The next morning, something beautiful happened. Emily's parents visited me at home, without an invitation, without pride. They brought a basket of flowers and some warm bread. When I opened the door, they both looked unsure, almost nervous. Emily's mother spoke first. Sarah, we came to apologize truly. We behaved horribly. You showed us more grace than we deserved. Her husband nodded. We were blinded by appearances. Please forgive us. I looked at them. Two people who had spent their lives chasing reputation, finally humbled by a moment of truth. And I felt no anger. Just quiet understanding. I forgave you a long time ago, I said softly. Because resentment only hurts the heart that carries it. They both looked relieved, tears gathering in their eyes. For the first time, we sat together, as equals, as family. No rich, no poor. Just people. As days turned into weeks, the tension between our families faded. Emily and Daniel moved into their new home, and I visited often. Her parents, too, began to call me, not out of formality, but out of genuine respect. We shared meals, laughter, and even helped each other when times were hard. One afternoon, Emily's mother came to me and said, "You taught me something I'll never forget. Sarah, that real class isn't in what you wear or own. It's in how you treat others." I smiled and said, "We're all students of life. Some lessons just take longer to learn." From that day forward, they never treated me like a poor mother again. They spoke of me with admiration. And though I never sought revenge or recognition, I could feel that justice, quiet, humble justice, had found its way home. Years later, when Daniel and Emily had children of their own, Emily would often tell them stories about kindness, about dignity, about their grandmother, who never raised her voice, but changed everything by staying silent and graceful. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sunset pour gold across the fields, my brother called. "How's our family doing?" he asked, his tone light. I smiled. "Peaceful, Michael. Finally peaceful." He chuckled softly. "That's good. You always knew how to turn pain into peace, sister." I watched the sky fade into gentle shades of pink and orange and whispered, "It's not about winning, Michael. It's about staying kind, even when people mistake your kindness for weakness." And as the night settled in, I closed my eyes with a heart full of quiet gratitude. Because in the end, I didn't have to prove my worth. I just had to live it. Moral: never judge someone by what they seem to have. True strength doesn't shout. It shines quietly through humility, patience, and grace.